At my birthday dinner, Dad smiled. We didn't get you anything, money's tight. The next day, I found out they bought my brother a Rolex watch with the money I sent them. I, 32 discovered my parents used the money I sent them to buy my brother a Rolex while telling me they couldn't afford my birthday gift. I sat at the restaurant table, watching my parents smile across from me like everything was perfectly normal. It was my 32nd birthday, and they'd suggested this dinner themselves, insisting on taking me out to celebrate. The place wasn't fancy, just a mid-range steakhouse in the strip mall near their house, but I appreciated the gesture. After years of sending them money every month to help with their expenses, it felt good to have them acknowledge my birthday with something more than a text message. My younger brother wasn't there. He never was anymore, not for anything involving me. He'd moved back in with our parents 2 years ago after his third failed business venture, and from what I could tell, he spent most of his time gaming in his old bedroom and occasionally doing freelance graphic design work that barely covered his car insurance. Dad cleared his throat as the waiter took our dessert orders. He glanced at Mom, who gave him an encouraging nod, and then he turned to me with an apologetic smile that immediately made my stomach tighten. I'd seen that expression before, usually right before they asked for extra money or told me about another expense they couldn't cover. He explained that they hadn't gotten me anything for my birthday this year. Money was really tight, he said, and they hoped I'd understand. Mom chimed in about the rising cost of groceries and how their property taxes had gone up. They both looked genuinely distressed about it, and I found myself reassuring them that it was fine, that I didn't need anything, that their company was gift enough. I meant it too. I wasn't some materialistic person who needed presents to feel valued. I'd been sending them $1,500 a month for the past 3 years to help cover their mortgage and living expenses after Dad's hours got cut at the factory. It had stretched my own budget thin, especially with my student loans still hanging over me, but they were my parents. You help family. The dinner ended with hugs and promises to do it again soon. I drove home to my small one-bedroom apartment feeling oddly hollow, but telling myself I was being childish for feeling disappointed. They were struggling financially. I was helping them. That's what mattered. The next morning, I scrolled through social media while drinking my coffee, a mindless weekend ritual. That's when I saw it. My cousin had posted a photo from some gathering I hadn't been invited to, and there in the background was my brother, grinning widely while showing off his wrist to someone off camera. The watch caught the light in the photo, unmistakably expensive, unmistakably a Rolex. My coffee went cold in my hand as I stared at the screen. My brother, who'd been unemployed or underemployed for 2 years, wearing a watch that cost more than I made in 2 months. I zoomed in on the photo, hoping maybe it was a fake, some knockoff he'd bought online to make himself feel important. But the more I looked, the more real it appeared. I called my cousin. We weren't particularly close, but we'd always gotten along at family functions. I asked her casually about the gathering, when it had been, who was there. She told me it was just last week, a small family thing at my aunt's house. My parents had been there. My brother had apparently been showing off his new watch all evening, talking about how it was an early inheritance, a gift from our parents to celebrate him finally getting serious about his career. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat in silence for what felt like hours. Early inheritance. The words rattled around in my skull like marbles in a jar. My parents, who told me just yesterday that money was too tight to buy me a birthday card, had bought my brother a Rolex as an early inheritance. I did some research. The model he was wearing, based on what I could make out in the photo, ran between $8,000 and $12,000. I'd been sending my parents $18,000 a year. For 3 years. $54,000, and they couldn't afford a birthday gift for me, but they could drop 10 grand on a watch for my unemployed brother. The rage came slowly, building like a wave. I'd been living frugally, eating cheap meals, driving a car held together with duct tape and prayers, putting off dental work because I couldn't afford it after sending them their monthly check. And they'd taken that money I'd sacrificed for, and given it to my brother in the form of a luxury watch. I didn't call them immediately. I needed to think, to plan. Confronting them in anger would get me nowhere. They'd make excuses, tell me I was misunderstanding, that the watch was purchased with different money. But I knew the truth. I'd seen their bank statements before when helping them organize their finances. There was no mysterious other source of income. The money had come from me. I spent the weekend researching, planning, and most importantly, documenting everything. I pulled up 3 years of bank transfers, every single payment I'd made to them. I made spreadsheets, calculated totals, noted dates. I also started making phone calls. My aunt, the one who'd hosted the gathering, was more than happy to chat once I called her directly. She told me all about how proud my parents were of my brother's new watch, how they'd saved up for months to give him something special. She even mentioned, without prompting, that they'd been talking about giving him more, maybe helping him with a down payment on a condo. Saved up for months. Using my money. Monday morning, I called my bank and set up a new account, one my parents had no information about. I transferred everything except what I needed for my immediate bills. Then I called them. Dad answered, cheerful as always, asking how my weekend had been. I told him I'd seen the photo of my brother's new Rolex. There was a pause, just a beat too long, before he laughed and said something about my brother getting lucky with a freelance gig. I asked him directly how much the watch had cost. He stumbled over his words, said he didn't really know, that my brother had bought it himself with money he'd saved. I told him I knew that was a lie. I told him my cousin had already explained that they'd given it to him as a gift, as an early inheritance. The line went quiet. Then Dad tried a different approach, explaining that my brother needed encouragement, that he'd been struggling, that they thought a nice gift might motivate him to get his life together. I asked why they'd told me money was too tight for a birthday gift while they were buying my brother a $10,000 watch. He didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, he tried several answers, each one contradicting the last. Eventually, Mom got on the phone, her voice tight with defensiveness. She told me I was being selfish, that I made good money and didn't need their gifts, while my brother was struggling and needed their support. I asked her if she understood that the money they'd used to buy that watch had come from me, if she grasped that I'd been sending them $1,500 a month for 3 years. She went quiet. Then she said something about it being a loan, that they'd always planned to pay me back. I'd never asked for repayment. We'd never discussed it as a loan. It had been presented as help for struggling parents, and I'd given it freely because I loved them and wanted them to be secure. But hearing her reframe it now, hearing the entitlement in her voice, something in me snapped. I told them the monthly payments were stopping immediately. Mom started crying, asking how they were supposed to pay their bills. I suggested they sell the Rolex. Dad got angry then, actually raising his voice, telling me I couldn't just abandon them. That family doesn't work that way. I found that almost funny, considering what they'd done, but I didn't laugh. I simply told them they'd made their choice about which son to support, and now they'd have to live with it. I hung up while they were still talking. The next few days were a storm of messages and calls. My brother finally reached out, angry that I'd cut off the parents, calling me selfish and cruel. He said the watch had been a gift for all his hard work, for not giving up despite his setbacks. I asked him what hard work he meant, since he'd been living rent-free in our parents' house for 2 years playing video games. He blocked me. My parents tried every angle. Guilt, anger, bargaining, more guilt. Mom sent long text messages about how hurt she was, how she'd raised me better than this. Dad tried the practical approach, sending me their bills, showing me how much they needed. I didn't respond to any of it. I'd said everything I needed to say. My aunt called, trying to mediate. She'd heard both sides now and admitted that what my parents had done was wrong, but she urged me to forgive them, to understand that they hadn't meant to hurt me. I asked her if she'd be so understanding if someone had stolen $50,000 from her and given it to someone else. She didn't have much to say after that. 3 weeks after I'd cut off the money, my brother moved out of my parents' house. Apparently, they'd told him he needed to start contributing to the household expenses if he was going to keep living there. Without my monthly payments, they couldn't afford to support him anymore. He moved in with his ex-girlfriend, which I only knew because my cousin mentioned it in passing. My parents tried a new approach after that. They apologized. Sort of. Mom sent a long email explaining that they'd made a mistake, that they hadn't realized how much the watch would hurt me, that they'd been trying to help my brother get motivated. She said they'd always loved us both equally, but my brother needed more support because he was struggling while I was doing well. She asked if I could find it in my heart to forgive them and resume helping with their expenses. I read the email 3 times, looking for any real acknowledgement of what they'd done. Any understanding that they'd taken my money under false pretenses, that they'd lied to my face at my birthday dinner, that they'd shown clear favoritism while expecting me to bankroll it. The apology was there, buried in justifications and excuses, but the understanding wasn't. I didn't respond. 2 months after I'd stopped the payments, Dad called me from an unknown number. I answered out of curiosity. He told me they were going to lose the house. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. They'd been counting on my money to make the mortgage payments, and without it, they couldn't keep up. He begged me to reconsider, just for a few months while they figured things out. I asked if they'd sold the Rolex. He went quiet. Then he admitted my brother still had it, that it wouldn't be right to take back a gift. I told him it wouldn't be right to expect me to pay their mortgage after they'd stolen from me either. He started crying then, actually crying, saying I was destroying the family, that I'd regret this someday. Maybe I would, but I didn't regret it then. I talked to a lawyer during this time, just to understand my options. She confirmed what I'd suspected. The money I'd sent them had been a gift legally, not a loan, which meant I had no legal recourse to get it back. But it also meant I had no legal obligation to continue giving them anything. She asked if I wanted to pursue any action against them. I said no. The point wasn't to punish them legally. The point was to stop letting them use me. 3 months in, my parents sold their house. Not to foreclosure, but in a regular sale. They'd apparently found a buyer willing to move quickly. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Mom sent me the new address in a text message with no other commentary. I saved it, but didn't respond. My brother sold the Rolex 4 months after they gave it to him. I only knew because my cousin saw him posting about it online, complaining about needing quick cash. He apparently got about $6,000 for it, roughly half what my parents had paid. He used the money to buy a used car. The irony of that, my parents' house gone, my brother's precious gift sold at a loss for something practical, wasn't lost on me. 6 months after I'd cut them off, Mom called. Not to ask for money or to guilt me, but just to talk. She asked how I was doing, if work was going well, if I was seeing anyone. It felt like a trap at first, but as we talked, I realized she was just lonely. She admitted that things had been hard, that downsizing had been difficult, that she missed the house. She didn't apologize again, didn't ask me to reconsider. She just talked, like we used to before everything fell apart. I let her. We talked for an hour about nothing important, and when we hung up, something felt different. Not forgiven, not fixed, but different. Dad never called to just chat. His silence spoke volumes about who he was, about which of them had really been driving the favoritism. Or maybe he was just too proud. I didn't know and found I didn't particularly care. I saw my brother once, by accident, at a grocery store about 7 months after everything had imploded. He saw me too. We made eye contact across the produce section. He looked away first, grabbed what he needed, and left quickly. I noticed he wasn't wearing a watch at all anymore. My life improved after I stopped sending the money. I got the dental work done that I'd been putting off. I fixed my car properly instead of bandaging it with temporary solutions. I started saving for a down payment on a house of my own. The freedom of having that $1,500 a month for myself was staggering. I hadn't realized how much stress the financial strain had been causing until it was gone. I still thought about them, wondered if I'd done the right thing. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered sitting in that restaurant, watching my parents lie to my face about not being able to afford a birthday gift while my brother's Rolex was probably already wrapped and waiting at home. That memory kept me steady. A year after I'd cut off the money, I got a card in the mail. Inside was a short note from both parents. They didn't apologize again. They didn't ask for anything. They just said they hoped I was well and that they were thinking of me. It was my birthday. They'd remembered this time, even without money to send a gift. I put the card on my refrigerator and left it there. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that's all you get, and you have to decide if it's enough. I hadn't decided yet. Maybe I never would. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I'd never send them another dollar, and I'd never again sacrifice my own well-being for people who valued me so little. The family drama had settled into a cold peace. We existed in each other's worlds, but didn't interact. My cousin still kept me updated on the major events. My parents were managing in their apartment. My brother had finally gotten a steady job in marketing. Nobody talked about the Rolex or the house or the money anymore. It had all been swept under the rug of family history, another story nobody wanted to examine too closely. But I remembered. I'd always remember. And that memory had taught me something valuable about love, obligation, and the price of being taken for granted. Some lessons cost $50,000 to learn. Mine had been worth every penny.